Welcome everyone to our panel discussion tonight, Latinas Leading in STEM. Thank you to our speakers and moderator, Catalina, Soledad, and Valentina for joining us today. It's a privilege to hear about your journeys, and we hope that tonight benefits all of our guests. Just a quick intro, Squist is a nonprofit organization that collaborates with STEM leaders to engage and inspire women and girls in STEM with programs, advocacy, and support networks across Canada. I'm grateful to be hosting this virtual event from the unceded and shared territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver. And we would like to welcome our audience joining us today from the traditional lands of numerous First Nations across the country. With no further ado, Valentina.
Thank you so much, Camila. As you say, thank you and welcome to the forum, Latinas Leading in STEM. And thank you to the Society for Canadian Women in Science and Technology for opening this space. It's a pleasure and an honor to be moderating this session during Latin American Heritage Month and from the shared unceded traditional territory of the Katsi, Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and the other Coast Salish peoples, also known as Surrey, which is where I live. My name, as Camila said, is Valentina Ruiz Leotaud, and I'm the Communications Officer for the Sea Randalls Initiative, which is based at the University of British Columbia and is in charge of assessing the impact of fisheries on the marine ecosystems of the world. I've been with the Sea Randalls for the past 6 years, basically doing knowledge translation with the goal of pushing for science-based policymaking, supporting the work of students, other researchers, and environmental NGOs, particularly in developing countries, and making sure that important research doesn't just stay within academia. I'm originally from Venezuela, where I worked as a journalist for over 13 years, and I also host a podcast called Mujeres en Ciencia, whose goal is to showcase important research being conducted by Latin women. Now to our speakers, whom I will present briefly so that they can later on give us more details about their lives and careers. So joining us is Dr. Catalina Lopez-Correa, who is a Colombian physician specialized in human genetics and medical biosciences, and is currently the Chief Scientific Officer of the Canadian COVID-19 Genomics Network. We also have Dr. Soledad Miranda-Rottmann, who is a Chilean neuroscientist working as a research associate at the Mother-Child Hospital of the University of Montreal. Finally, we were supposed to have Dr. Edna Matta-Camacho, but she had a family emergency and she won't be able to be here with us today. But just to introduce her, she's a Colombian biochemist, currently working as an assessment officer at Health Canada's Therapeutics Products Directorate. So that's it for the short intros. Welcome everyone, bienvenidos todos, todas. Y well, first, I'd like for each of you, the panelists, to tell us more about yourself, your cultural roots, your education, and the career path that brought you to Canada. Maybe let's start with Catalina.
Good. Well, thank you for the invitation. A real pleasure to be here today. So I thought for this introduction, you already, Valentina told here that, well, I am actually from Colombia, Medellin, which is a city up in the mountains. They call us paisas to, you know, the people that come from that city. And I have been in Canada since 2008. I'll tell you a little bit my education, my journey really quickly. But I thought that instead of doing what I typically do in this type of panels where I just tell you, oh, you know, I studied this and then moved this and then this other thing. And everything seems like so easy when I tell it this way that, you know, I always kind of think, I'm missing the point here in telling also people that this has not been an easy journey, at all. So I'm gonna basically tell my story in two parts. One is gonna be the easy one, quickly, what I did, what I have done to be here today. And the other one I'll take in each of, and maybe a couple of different points in my career, maybe some challenges that illustrate some of the situations we have to live through that I'm sure many of you will relate and will maybe, feel, we'll have some maybe reports with that. So as Valentina mentioned, I studied medicine in Colombia. Almost as soon as I finished medicine, I practiced very little. I had the opportunity to go to France. My dream since I was 70 years old, I was to go to Paris. I don't even know why, but I wanted to go to Paris. I spent many, many years trying to study French in Colombia, which is very difficult. As we know, learning languages in our countries is always a challenge. I was not in a bilingual school or anything, just on a, the normal school. And so try to learn French. Anyway, when I got to France, I figured that all my years of trying to learn, I didn't actually, was not that much useful for me to move in French in France. So I ended up trying to learn French there, did actually my initially a master's in genetics. And from there, I moved to Belgium to do a PhD, and I did a PhD in human genetics in the Catholic University of Leuven, which is Flemish speaking. So talking about languages, I moved to Belgium thinking that I could also speak French, but it was better to speak English or Flemish. Of course, I didn't speak Flemish, so that was another language challenge. And from there, I got my first job after 8 years of medicine and almost 8 years of master's and PhD. Got my first job when I was 33 years old in a biotech company in London. So from there, France, Belgium, London. Got that job with American biotech company that ended up being acquired by another company. So after a year and a half there, basically they closed operations and everything. And I got a new opportunity. I applied for a new opportunity in Reykjavik, Iceland. So my family was like, you've been going north. There is no more north than Reykjavik. Where are you going next? Anyway, so I went to Reykjavik and spent there 4 amazing years. And from there, I moved to the US and got a position with Eli Lilly and Company, working in pharmacogenomics with them. And in 2008, I came to Canada. I initially worked with Genome Quebec as Chief Scientific Officer, and then have a few years with Genome BC here in the West Coast. I'm based actually in Vancouver. And then now I'm working with Genome Canada as their Chief Scientific Officer. Genome Canada is based in Ottawa, but I'm still kind of living here in Vancouver. So now this is the easy story. Now let's see the story behind the story. The challenges. So I would say first challenge that I think for all of us or many of us apply, the language. We go out and we try to figure out our path. Initially it was French and then English and still today, I've been out of the country 26 years. I've been working French and English for all these years. And I still today enter meetings sometimes. And, when I don't speak, people see me and they think, oh, she might be European. Oh, she might be Canadian, whatever. But as soon as I open my mouth and I start moving my hands and expressing myself in the Latino way, they are like, okay, she's clearly not from here. So let's figure, where is she from? And then you see in their eyes, I always see in their eyes, like, they're trying to figure out my accent. Or sometimes they're like looking at me like, what is she talking about? Like, I cannot really completely understand. So the language is, of course, a big challenge that I think we all of us face. And I would say, the only way to really get through that is, work hard and, show your knowledge, because you have to go through that barrier of people might think you are stupid or you don't know your things well because you're not able to speak very well as well as your colleagues that are native speakers. So yeah, I think there is, for me, it has been like dedication, know my staff, be well prepared for all my meetings, be, my knowledge of the things, and my passion. And my passion always gives a little bit of a spice that, people end up hopefully liking. So the other piece is that, of course, I got my training in medicine and I started my PhD. I say, I moved from France, I did my master's. What I didn't say is that I actually started a PhD in France as soon as I finished my master's. And it was an horrible experience. It was the worst nightmare ever. I didn't have the training for the things I had to do in the lab. I was like out of my comfort zone. And the director of that lab was a true, very horrible person. So I had to make the decision and move, and I got my PhD in Belgium, which was great. But, all this is like, nothing is like when we tell it now, like, oh yeah, master, PhD, everything's so rosy and so perfect. Then when I went to
those things are not in your CV for sure.
Exactly, those things are not. You will not see in my CV that I started a PhD and I quit at 6 months after, and I had to start another one in another country with another supervisor in another topic completely different.
Right.
And I don't really tell much that story, but I think it's a story that's important that we tell those stories, because we see that it's not a story of success, but it's also many failures that build on a success later on.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I had, and many that has been a recurring theme in my career, is that, even though I'm qualified and I have been really fortunate to access really high positions in the US, in Canada, and, I'm privileged to be, I think, now I am the only non-Canadian or non-European woman, or even men. There's no men also, immigrants, that is not Canadian or not European, that is in a C level with one of the genome centers across Canada. There are 6 genome centers in Genome Canada. They're all the leadership, the CEOs, CSOs, CFOs, they're all Canadians or Europeans. There's no Latino there. There's no Latino. So no men, no woman, no nothing. I feel very fortunate to be in that position, but again, it has not been a very straightforward and easy path. When I went to Decode, this amazing company in Iceland, in Reykjavik, they actually, after 2.5 years there, they merged 2 groups, and they were deciding who they will put in as the head of that. I had years of experience. I had all the training. I had everything to be that person. And they ended up putting their British man that was much younger than me, less experienced than me, but he was British and he was a man. And of course, it looked like really nice. And so, again, we have to all live through those frustrations and not let us down with that. And the other thing I would say here is that, you get to a point, and that I think I see there's some men here, so that apply for men and for women. You start to see yourself as, as soon as you start to climb, like happened to me, taking positions with more and more responsibility, I start to see that I am the only or women Latino in the room. And I have my other, that makes me unique. And I call myself the L3, and is Latino lesbian lady. So I am married to a woman. So it's a Colombian woman too. So we're 2 Latinas. And that makes that, the minority of the minority of the minority. So every time I open my eyes, I'm the only gay person in this room. I'm the only woman in this room. I'm the only Latino in this, or Latina in this room. So that's also a big responsibility to really show what we can do, but also with you, with all our colleagues and all our friends and all our, young people that are coming from our countries, to see and to show that, yes, we can do this. We can do this. We can access these positions. We can grow, and we can, develop our professional careers and get access to nice positions and nice roles. So I think I was maybe too long, but since Edna is not here, I took my time and her time.
No, it's great. Thank you so much, Catalina. We're actually going to go more in detail into the challenges, which I'm very curious about. But let's go to Soledad. Soledad, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I was very interested, hearing this testimony. And I'm joining from Montreal, known as Yoyega, the traditional unceded territory of the Kenyan Kehaka, also known as Mohawk in the language of the settlers. And I hope as an immigrant to contribute here to the social equality and to preserving the beautiful land and waters where we have the privilege to be. So I was born in Santiago de Chile. Grew up in a farm close to the city where I was encouraged to explore, to be free. I really owe a lot to my family to have pursued a career that very few of the people I knew from childhood, followed. And that's one of the reasons, I'm very active in trying to encourage other Latinas to pursue a career in science as a way to, go out there and be powerful. And so, well, it hasn't, as we were here, this is never an easy path, and we do it the best way we can. I decided to study biochemistry, did a PhD in molecular and cell biology in Chile. And at that time, I already had a son and decided I wanted to stay in Chile. But I was convinced, and I'm grateful for that I was convinced that why not going out to do a postdoc? And that really opened my world. I had worked in France also before, but just a short stay of a few months. It's not the same. I arrived to New York City with my 5-year-old son. And, at the beginning in this big, beautiful research center, the Rockefeller University, I totally felt an imposter, which is something we hear, I felt that I was totally out of my element and was a bit paralyzed by all the possibilities. We are sometimes in our own countries, or countries of origin, we have so many barriers to be able to fulfill all our potential. So for me to not have those barriers was paralyzing. But slowly, I think we are good at that, Latinas, to find our way, to solve one by one the problems. And I learned so much. I really learned so much. And I started in neuroscience, although that wasn't my primary, I started more doing gene regulation in cardiovascular disease, but the brain was fascinating. So I will not enter into details, but I started to understand how the human hearing was working. And then from there, how the brain innervated the cochlea, I got totally interested in the cortex, in the brain cortex, which is what I'm working at now. Yeah, so that's a brief description of my journey. And now I'm turned 50 years old 2 years ago, and I feel that I'm in the middle of my life. And that it's time for a change. And that's why I've been very active, volunteering in different organizations, because I think that I enjoy a lot working in the bench. That's what I wanted to do. But I think that I can do maybe more advising or, directing something. So I'm looking onto a new way to give more to society at this point. Yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Soledad. And I'm going to continue with you, and then the same question goes to Catalina. But you mentioned a little bit that you were encouraged to explore your surroundings, the nature around you when you were little. Not every girl, especially in Latin America, has that experience. In fact, one of my questions is that I guess what got you initially into science? Because for women in Latin America, it's not very common to be encouraged to go into engineering or math or biology or sciences in general. So the women that I've interviewed in the past sometimes mention having, like a specific professor that was like really encouraging, or even like a TV show about science that awakened that interest in them. What was it for you? And then the same question for Catalina.
Yeah, it was gradual. I always was observing. My uncle is he's a veterinary, but he ended up being an ornithologist. So for me, it was like natural to go and see the animals and the birds. And my mom, who was a designer, turned out to be ending up as an organic farmer. So she was making all these experiments with her crops. And I remember reading an article in a teenage magazine, like about, these magazines have like makeup and whatever, but it had a little article about careers that you could follow, and there was like marine biologist. Wow, that was fascinating. And I read that that this career of biochemistry existed. So that's the first time I heard about it. And with the support of my father also, which I think it's not so common. My father supported my mom in being very free and choosing her career, and supported me always. And that's something I really hope everybody has, support at home. Yeah.
Thank you. What was it for you, Catalina?
Yeah, well, interesting. Really interesting to hear you, Soledad, talking about your father. For me, well, a couple of things. When I grew up, I was really like you a little bit, a very curious child. I love nature, and I was, I grew up in the city. My parents had a farm, and we went every weekend, and I was the one always with the animals. So I was always, when the cows were, giving birth, I was the first there to, be there, giving birth to the cows, the pigs, every, and the animals in particular were always, I was very attracted. And also, since I was, I'm the oldest, we are only two. I have a brother, and it's interesting because when I look, backwards, I see, and even when I was growing up, I saw a lot of families where, the boy was the one that was let, go to certain places, and the girl, you stay home, and your brother can go and party and do things. And then growing up, I was almost the contrary. I was encouraged by my dad a lot, and my parents, the two of them, really to do all kinds of things, like ride horses. There was like I learned how to drive a car when I was 12 years old. I couldn't even stand there. I was already driving the car, and I was out, and I was all my dad, like, you can do things. If you want to do it, you can do it. You just go and do. Want to learn how to drive? I show you, and let's drive. So he was very, again, my dad, very, very supportive. My mom too. And when I started to think about what to study, I was very interested in biology. But then that's when I think these, ideas of biology, and I think my father never really told me exactly, like, don't study biology, but there was something there that I think there was maybe a kind of a subliminal message, like, medicine. So, medicine is, so of course I ended up studying medicine. I don't even know how, because I was never dreaming about the stethoscope and being the doctor and being that figure. That was never my dream. And sure enough, when I studied medicine, seeing patients was not my real passion, and working in the clinic was not my real passion. But when I got genetics during my medical school, I was like, okay, this is interesting. I went to France, and initially went to France with not knowing that I will do anything about science or even genetics or genomics. I started doing an internship in a hospital, seeing cancer patients. And I figured when I was at the hospital, all the patients started to get some genetic study. And I was like, oh, what is this? A karyotype. They look at the chromosomes of those patients when they have in their tumors. They look at their DNA in the chromosomes. Oh, this is interesting. Where are they doing this analysis? And they told me, oh, yeah, here in front at the university, there is a lab. We can introduce you. So I was meant to be the whole day seeing patients, and I ended up in the morning, I went and saw the patients, I had to do what I had to do for my internship. But as soon as I finished the patients, I went running to the lab to learn about genetics, to start to look in the microscope and all that. So, and interesting about stereotypes, because I remember also my grandfather, when I studied medicine, he was like, oh, okay, good, interesting, you're studying medicine, but I think if you're specialized, I hope you will choose pediatrics. And I was like, oh yeah, this is your typical stereotype. Like, yeah, you're a woman, you have to work with kids, and pediatrics seems very suitable. He died before I could do genetics and genomics, but all my career after I make that decision, even to move to Europe and all that, I got lots of support from my family, and to do genetics, and to dream big. That's also, it's like, don't look at your barriers, but look at your potential and where do you want to get. And at one point, when I came to Canada, my dad became almost my mentor. He was like, okay. And when I was accessing to these boards and leadership positions, he had a lot of experience because he was an entrepreneur in Colombia, and he was like, oh, so and so, maybe you need to handle this like this, or maybe you need to really super supportive.
Yeah, I was gonna go to that actually, and again, this goes for both of you, because mentorship is key in any profession, but especially I think for women in science. So, besides your dad, have you had any specific mentor that pushed you to believe in your potential as a woman, as a Latina woman in science?
Yeah. So I want to say that I actually never had the right mentor. I had great mentors. I had men, very smart and successful men that teach me a lot, and I learned a lot from them. But I really never had someone like me, to look up and to say, that's what I want to do. And I think part of this wanting to change career right now, the direction is that I decided not to be a professor, because I saw that what I wanted to do is just work in the bench, that I wanted to be a bench scientist. And I think if I had seen somebody like me as a professor, I would then have chosen that path. And I would advise any young scientist not to choose the middle point. Choose to go to the top, because at the beginning of your career, you have a lot of opportunities. The more you specialize, the more you follow one path, the less possibilities you have to change. For example, if you're in academia, if you're not a professor at a young age, after that, it's very difficult to get a position. And being a research associate is the highest you can get, really, just being in academia, in a lab. And it means that you're not independent, that you have a relatively high salary that is difficult to handle for your boss, for your PI. And if the lab gets less funding, which happens very often, you probably will be hired part-time, or you will have to find another position. I have been lucky in that respect, but I feel also the problem of a very hierarchical, pyramidal structure, where if you're not in the top, you're not visible, and you have less and less opportunities to show your work. When you are a student, a postdoc, you go to meetings, show your poster, even sometimes you get to get talks, you can apply to scholarships. But when you're a research associate, you're already a professional, and there are very few opportunities really to shine. So if you're not, if for you teaching other people in the bench and you know, making your experiments that many times don't work is not enough, then, you know, maybe you shouldn't choose this as a career for life. And just to finish, I think now we have more mentors and more role models. So look for them. That's my message.
Thank you. Catalina, did you have any other mentors other than your dad?
Yes. And actually, it's interesting because I was not very familiar with this concept of mentorship, and similar to Soledad, when, you know, when I look backwards, like this now, well, when they announced the Nobel Prize, and there's this woman from California that is, you know, a woman first, and second gay, I was like, okay, this is the first time in all these many years of the Nobel Prize that we get, that I can get somebody that I can look at and say, well, this is a person like I relate completely. And we didn't have that. I didn't have. There was one woman in my town in Medellin that was like the exception to the rule. She was mycologist. She worked with mushrooms.
Fungus.
Yes. and she was, I mean, she got trained. She had a PhD. She was not married. I mean, nobody knew. I mean, she's, of course, she was not married. She was single, and she had no kids, and she was dedicated, devoted to the science. And I had the opportunity to meet her. But it was interesting because she always said she had no barriers, and it was another generation where, you know, she was like unique and she was a powerhouse. But anyway, so when I moved to I didn't really have this concept of mentors. The only woman I knew in science was this lady I mentioned, Angela Restrepo is her name. And she was a powerhouse in Colombia driving science, but just one person. But when I moved to the US after, you know, doing my PhD and all the time I spent in Europe, moving to the US, and I worked with this large multinational pharma company called Eli Lilly, they had a mentor program. And basically, when you join and you were in certain level at the company, you had to select 2 mentors. And they give you tools on how to select those mentors. And I had one that was vice president pharmacologist. So we met very formally every month, and that person started to, you know, show me. And I had another one that was more informal, and that was really a person that I would say changed my life in so many ways. She was a Latina from Panama. She was also gay, and she was incredible. She's still my friend today. And it was really thanks to her that I learned the importance of mentoring and the importance of supporting other Latinas and supporting, you know, younger people that are starting their career in science. So that was incredible. And since that point, I started to always, in all my new jobs, when I got to Genome Quebec, I got a mentor that was part of the board of Genome Quebec. And I met with that person every month. And he actually, that was a man, incredible, helped me, guide me. So I would say 90% of the mentors I have had have been absolutely incredible and amazing. But I have also, unfortunately, crossed paths with mentors that haven't been that good. And I would say in particular, sometimes women, where maybe now we're changing a little bit, but sometimes we're not, we tend to compete as opposed to support each other, as opposed to trying to lift and help the other one reach their maximum. We somewhat end up, somewhat competing. But for me, again, mentorship, not just having mentors that help me, but helping others has become a critical component. And just to finish, I remember my assistant, an administrative assistant when I was at Genome Quebec, and the one I had when I was at Genome BC, both of them, they were always laughing at me, like, you answer all emails. Like I can have an email from whomever person that saw my profile in LinkedIn. Oh, I'm planning to study this and this and this. Can I have an appointment with you? Can you tell me what you did? And I will say 100% to everybody, yes. And I might be up to my nose of work and, super busy, but this is important. This is really, and I actually love doing that. I love talking and, enjoying and learning and guiding. And whenever I can help open paths and open doors and connect people to get opportunities, to help them, because, the only thing I can do is to show and maybe point and maybe connect. And I love doing that. And I think it's amazing how much we can help just by connecting people and indicating when maybe the opportunities are.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. I've seen that in my own position, not from me, but from the PI that I work with. And I see how important that is for the younger generations. And I've heard this, that the lack of the little representation of Latinas in STEM, it's something that it can be a challenge, right? Like you don't have, as Soledad mentioned, that figure to look up to. Not that many. You had that person from Panama that I guess was very interesting to have as a role model. But I'm curious as to what other challenges connecting to being a Latina, specifically in science, have you guys faced? Either in academia, in government, in industry. What have been those challenges that may be fair from other women in science that are not Latinas?
I actually don't know. I think actually I would turn the question to say, what are the advantages we have as Latinas? Because, I don't think we face specifically a challenge that other immigrants, for example, or women in science face. It's difficult for all of us. Maybe, somebody else can say something that's specific. But I think that our upbringing, these extended families, this sharing our feelings as something normal, makes us very aware of human communications. We know the importance of the human factor, and we apply that to solving problems in the workplace in a way that I think is quite unique. We like to make people feel part of the project, to make them feel welcome. We like to make the place inviting. If there is a plant in a lab, probably a Latina put the plant there. And also, I think we are creative. We come from a background where we didn't have things easy, where the supply chains maybe don't work, customer service doesn't exist. We have to wait a lot to get something. And again, with our talking to people. We solve the problems in a very creative way. We don't get paralyzed by problems. We take them in a stride and find a way around. And maybe also very Latino, as we are not so blindly following what the boss says. We are not confrontational, but we find a way around. We are not, if somebody tells us, no, this is not possible, maybe if I ask somebody, find another way. So all this, I think it's a creative way of solving problems. Is a very good thing that helps us in difficult situations. And I would say that as Latinas, we have that as an advantage.
Yeah, we're resourceful, definitely. Yeah. Then let's use your question for Catalina. What are the advantages of being a Latina in the way we address challenges in science?
Yeah, well, I agree. Many advantages. I do also see some challenges. Advantages, I think, for me, and many, you mentioned already, Soledad, is really, I think, our capacity to work in a community, and that goes, even from the way we are educated with families, always with people around. So that capacity to work with others, I think, and I guess, the fact that we always try to find ways to solve the problems. At least, what I say is like, we're persistent and we are there to try and find solutions, as opposed to, oh, this is a problem and here I am. And I think because we had to face, in a way, so many barriers during our career, that there's like, I don't accept no for an answer. I'm going to go and try to find ways. Now, in terms of challenges, the language I mentioned, I think that's a bit of a challenge. And also, the other day I was talking to a colleague that was passing an interview process, and she told me, like, as much as this organization was a large organization that we know here in Canada, they're advertising all this equity, diversity, and inclusion, and they want to engage people that are more diverse, and they have all these roadmaps and strategies. Whenever they are doing interviews, who is interviewing you in that panel when you are applying for a job? I have interviewed for so many jobs in so many ways and so many things. I've never had a single Latina scientist interview me, or even a Latina that can relate to what I am, who I am, where I come from, and that can understand me from really who I am. Mm-hmm. So, and that's not a Latino problem only, as you say, Soledad. This is an immigrant. Like, we have the Asians, we have all these different groups that, when you get interviewed by a group of all white Canadians, they're great, but how much they understand of what you can offer, or how much they understand of what maybe your challenges are to get to that place where you are. So I think talking about these and talking about the need for more equity, more diversity in the different, like in and sometimes, I'm not, as you also say, I try to find my way. I'm not the one person that is confrontational. I try to more align with people as opposed to misalign or confront. But sometimes I also, and in particular lately, I am sometimes calling people, and on Twitter, sometimes I call, like, how come you have a panel for men? That's not acceptable. What is your diversity? Where is the woman that you're bringing? What is your increased diversity of underrepresented groups? And I think we really ought to start voicing some of these, because I figure also sometimes people don't realize that there are some challenges in terms of equity. I remember, one piece that I didn't tell about my story is that 2019, my partner Maria Elaida and I decided to return to Colombia after 26 years being outside, because we wanted to give back, and all this, romantic idea that you have to, returning to your roots and your country and all these. And well, of course, who will know that was just before the pandemic and that the world will going to change completely. So we went there, and I took a job leading as a director for operations for an innovation hub in my city, in Medellin. And when I got there, I told the general director and say, do you have any policies here, about equity, diversity, and in particular gender equity? And he said, but why, Catalina? We don't have a problem here. Like, look, we are about 60% women. The organization is called Ruta N. There's 60% women in Ruta N. And I was like, 60%? Well, guess what? Not a single woman in the board of directors. There are three directors: the general director, director for strategy, director for operations. I was the first woman director for operations in the whole story of the company. All other directors are men. And so all higher positions, all they call it gerentes, all the gerentes or managers, they're all or mostly 80% men. And then, of course, and if you look at organizations like Genome Canada and other, we actually have very similar situations. Until last year, 2 years ago, there was not a single CEO of any of the genome centers in Canada that was a woman. Now things are changing a little bit. So I think as women, we still face many barriers. You can call it unconscious bias, you can call it, there's many, but we still have difficulties. And, we work as hard, or harder. I always say that when I start a job at people start the job like Canadians that have been trained here, start the job at zero. You start zero and you have to show what you can do. I start -20 and I have to show what I can do. I start -20 and I work twice as hard. I still think that we bring a lot, but we face challenges and difficulties and barriers to get to.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, it starts with the recruiting process, right? If you go to an interview and everyone is, I guess the standard and you are not, then yeah, there may be some barriers there to deal with. And on that note, I guess my next question is, if you were to advise the newer generation of Latinas in STEM how to navigate the workplace, what advice could you give to them?
Yeah, well, there is so much, from what I have failed and survived and, and succeeded. But, maybe the first thing is to say, aim high, aim to the highest. And your imagination should be your limit.
I guess not your accent, not your, where you come from, rather. Yeah,
I think there are two kinds of people. The ones that use adversity as a way to justify their failure, and people who use adversity as a way to, to feel the push to demonstrate that we can do it. And that's very important in science, because there is a lot of things that don't work the way we expect, and we have to be resilient. So also taking from my own experience, try to find good role models, successful women that, that have the kind of life you want to have. because there were some women when I was a student, an undergraduate, but they had a life that I didn't want it. You know, they weren't happy. And I mean, the few that they were there. And I think that they are some, I mean, there are many women who have a career in science that's also fulfilling in other aspects of their life. And that for me was important. And now I see more like that. And there are many factors that have changed. And I think in a way now for women, it's a bit easier. The Me Too movement, I think, is super important. Maybe especially important in Latino countries where women are were expected to be harassed in labs, and I saw it. You know, I saw it that was normal, and now it's not, and that's a big step in you know, in feeling that we are the value we really have, right? And maybe something which is a detail, but me that I teach a lot of, you know, students that come to the lab. If somebody is teaching you, if somebody is giving you their time to be a mentor, take it seriously, you know, write down the answer, think about them. It's so valuable. These generous people who are showing you the way or donating their time, you know, the only thing they want as a payment is that you actually learn what you're telling them, and that you don't ask the same question again the next day, you know, because you start to build up from that new questions, more interesting, and yeah, that I think it's what I can think of right now.
Thank you, Catalina.
Yeah, for me, I think starting, I would say dream big. Don't be afraid. Dream big. And you know, I think in those big dreams, you might not be able to get everything, but actually it's incredible when you clearly, I think one of the most difficult things is to know where you want to go. But once you think, okay, I want to go there, I'm really, you know, going to persevere and I'm going to try and get there, is incredible how sometimes the paths are opening and things are aligning. So dreaming big, working hard. I think we you know, when I say starting from -20 is real, you know, and my career has been, I love working, but I do dedicate a lot of time to my work and to you know, dedication and a structure, and yeah, when I get a mentor, I use that opportunity to the maximum to try and learn from them, ask them questions, bring some of the concerns I have, some of the challenges I face with people I you know, work with, or opportunities I want to you know, to take. And I would say the other one is don't give up. Don't give up. And again, going back to my little story and the things that are not written in the CV, when I finished my PhD, I sent about 100 applications for jobs until I got that job in England with that biotech company. And it was an applied scientist job that, you know, it was not the ideal thing I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to go up, do a postdoc, no more academia, finish. I want to go to the private sector, ideally. But, you know, I applied to 100 jobs and I got so many letters that I kept for many, many years. All these amazing letters. Oh, you know, your CV is incredible. You have all these skills, but no, thank you very much. No, thank you very much. And one after the other one and after the other one. And you have to be there like, okay, I'll send another one. I'll send another one. I'll send another one. I'll send another one. When I applied to the position at GMM Quebec, coming from the US, we actually had to leave the US because we could not get married as two women in the US. So we were happy there, but we were like, okay, we need to find a country that accept our relationship and accept us as two women. And so we were looking at Canada. And I started applying for positions here. Oh, send one, nothing. And I already had years of experience. And I sent this application to GM Quebec. Didn't hear anything. Finally, I pick up the phone and call them. So again, persevere, don't give up. I call them and say, I sent my CV. Oh, what is your name again? Boo, boo, boo. The guy looking in, between papers. Oh. And finally they call me for an interview. But, if you just sit there and get frustrated, all this is very frustrating. And I think we, again, work hard, dream big, get a mentor. I think it's very important. Get the right education also for me, having the MD and the PhD has been a good combination, even though I don't feel as an MD, and I don't please, like Maria, my partner, say, 8 years of medical school, and the only thing you can tell me is take an Advil. That's the only thing. That's as much as the maximum thing I can do in terms of medical care at home. But it has been useful. It's a useful training for me. So whenever you get the opportunity to get some training that is offered through your job, or maybe there are online courses that you can take, I think get that training, learn about new things, get new skills into your whole package of professional package. That's also super useful.
Definitely. And speaking of those rejection letters, I guess it matches perfectly my next question, because especially for women in science, the imposter syndrome is a very common topic, regardless of where you come from. At least that's what I've been seeing in the years I've been in academia and also interviewing women in science. So have you dealt with imposter syndrome? And if you could talk a little bit about this, that'd be great. Soledad,
Sorry. Of course. As I mentioned, when I started my postdoc, I felt that I was totally out of my element. But soon I, took my way again. I think part of this imposter problem is that we don't have the right mentors, as we have been talking about, the right role models, and the society that's very hostile for women. So I think as we also mentioned, this equity and diversity is so important. Equity means that we need extra help. It's not correct to say that we all, start from the same level as my colleague here was saying. We start from lower, so we have to make things that help women feel confident. And for example, in Chile a few years ago in neuroscience, neuroscience have all this component of electrophysiology. That's a very male-dominated area because it involves a lot of math. And unfortunately, there is this myth that something is wrong with our brain and that we cannot handle math as well as men. And that's totally wrong. Our brains are exactly the same in almost everything, including math, capacity to do math and physics. But it's, even though girls, very young girls have still do the same, at the same level as boys, soon after something happened in school system that makes us perform worse. And so any activity that can breach that barrier is fantastic. And that's what the story I wanted to tell briefly. They did a course in electrophysiology only for women. Of course, that some people were complaining, why only women? This is, segregation, whatever. But it was so good. I heard that it really was important, and this kind of initiative, we need more like that to pinpoint, a place where we can boost the confidence of women. And that would be my advice, to do more like that.
Definitely level up.
Level up.
That's the equity part. Yeah, Catalina.
Yeah, well, is I think, yeah. There was a study, and I actually encourage you to maybe look. I think he has maybe some videos in YouTube. Nainan Aram is a professor at UBC, and he's the lead of the equity diversity. He's the vice dean of equity diversity at the life science faculty at UBC. And he put together, he did some analysis over many years of interviews and job applications and people that applied to certain jobs. And he basically, he was looking at women and gender initially, and then he was looking at intersectionality. Well, what about you being a woman and competing with men? But what about you being a Latino woman and competing with men? And what about you being a Latino Black? And what about being you a Latino gay woman competing? And he basically, the numbers and is quite shocking, because he says that if you have basically one woman, four people as the final group for interview, the short list for an interview, they will interview these 4 individuals, and if 3 of them are men and 1 is a woman, there is 0 chance that person will get the job. 0 chance. Like, it's not 25%, it's like 0. It's not 10%, it's not 5%, it's 0 chance. If you get 2 women and 2 men, there's about 20% of possibilities. And if you get 3 women and a man, there might be about 40%, not even 50% of possibilities that you could be the one that is selected at the end. So, and those are not my imagination. Those are real numbers from universities, from their panels. And again, that initially was only with women. And then as soon as you start to add other intersectionalities and other aspects, is more challenging, is really challenging. So I think there is a big piece in terms of education. The piece on imposter syndrome absolutely is is real. It's totally, and we don't often want to assume. I mean, it's difficult to kind of face it and say, I remember my first days at Eli Lilly in the US. Every time I parked my car in that parking and I saw this big Eli Lilly and Company, I was like, I had to kind of touch myself and say, am I really, this is a multinational, like, wow. Like, am I really here? Is it me? And sometimes I am still, sometimes with, I get sometimes to meet ministers or politicians, and I get to some of these high-level meetings, and I look around, and I'm kind of more and more taking the time to count how many men in this room, how many women, how many Latinos. So I count. It's just almost like an automatic thing, and every time I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to be at the level of this. I am going to, like we say in Spanish, I'm going to meter la pata. Voy a meter la pata en algún momento. I'm going to say something stupid here, or and I like to maybe bring the Zulma. Zulma made an interesting comment on the chat, Zulma, that you say that your dad used to call you little chick because, yeah, well, I joke in saying that I'll say my joke almost in Spanish, because I say, más cartones que un tugurio, like so many diplomas, but really like so many cardboards, like people that live in extreme poverty. Because, yeah, sometimes you get all this education, it doesn't mean like all these potential opportunities, economic opportunities and financial opportunities. At the same time, I do believe that when you love what you do, and when you really are dedicated, often the path is opening also in terms of financial opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. We are getting close to the time where we have to open it up for the audience, but I just have one last question, and it's definitely, I like asking this question to the women in science that I interview, and there are in fact many challenges of being a Latina in science, but what is the beauty of doing science? Like what is the best part of doing science for you?
Yeah, for me, it's understanding nature and the brain. Specifically, what I'm studying is there is so much we don't know, and the beauty of discovering this little thing that leads you to the next question. That's great for me, super beautiful. The other beautiful thing is to actually mentor students in the lab, daily, teaching the little tricks of the trade and making relationship, lasting relationships also. Those, I would say, those two things, teaching and discovering, for me, are the most beautiful things.
Lovely, thank you, Soledad. Catalina, what is the beauty of doing science for you?
Well, for me, science, I am so thankful, genomics, that is, I have done a lot of things in my life, but genomics has been my continuum, and it has taken me to amazing places like Iceland, like, here. I go and visit indigenous communities for some of my work. So just, I love traveling, but I love even more traveling with a purpose, like with a scientific purpose, and going to meetings and meeting people from all different cultures. Science has been, for me, the way to open so many doors in terms of seeing the world from so many perspectives. I mentioned that I love mentoring, and I do love, I don't teach, but I love when I get the opportunity to go. Sometimes they invite me to schools, or to meet with younger women or women that are just maybe finishing high school and are deciding. I love these opportunities. I love that, seeing kind of their spark in their eyes and trying to figure out what they're going to do. And maybe, well, I imagine myself in those shoes when I was young, and trying to see a person that, oh my God, you can do this, you can be a geneticist, you can be a genomicist, you can look at, so I love that. I love those pieces. And well, I think for me in my job today, what I love is really the diversity of things I can do. I get in touch with so many people from so many different backgrounds, doing hardcore science, but also administration in science. So yeah, I think is this diversity, and every day is different for me in science, and I love that.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, so let's open up the floor for questions. Does anyone from the audience have any questions?
Don't be shy.
You can raise your hands, and Zulma, go ahead.
Of course, I'm not shy,
So
I talk a lot, and I even talk with hands because I'm from Colombia too. So that's our label. Well, no, I don't have questions. I just so grateful to hear both of you and to know Catalina, because I read, I believe, two years ago, before pandemic, that you were contacted by the minister. So they have a public note about you and your work. So it was very interesting to read about you. So meeting you today was very, very nice for me. Thank you so much for both of you. And I'm sorry, Catalina, you said that you answered your emails. I'm very sorry because I already sent you
really
an email.
To where? To my Gmail?
Yes.
Okay, well,
You see,
this is bad.
I take the words.
When did you send me that? Because yeah, maybe.
I think she just sent it.
Just now. You're just receiving now the email.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
wait for my answer. I'll be happy to answer. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, both of you, and thank you for organizing this meeting.
Thank you, Zulma. Marvin, go ahead.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you to both of you for this presentation. I only just heard of it on the weekend, and a friend of mine sent me the link, and I said, "Okay, I'm all in." I've the experience of seeing someone from your culture in a position, in a job interview. Like you were just saying, I can relate to that. I'm in computer science, and every time I've gone into a job interview, I've never, in the 20 plus years, I've never had someone Latina based in that job interview. And hearing your experience and I can totally relate to that. And I want to say, you bring something to the table as a Latino and Latina. You bring value, and you bring a different perspective to the conversation. As an immigrant, you bring a different perspective to the conversation. And every time you go into that interview, every time you go in and break that door, break that ceiling, you're bringing in the spice, you're bringing the sabor, the sazon, and that is something that's tremendously needed in the sciences, tremendously needed everywhere in the public sector, the private sector, because it's so unique. And that this is where we will find the solutions to the hard questions. The hard questions come from thinking differently, thinking creatively, and being kind, and remembering family, remembering that we are in a very tiny little planet, and we're all in this together. And sometimes people forget that's what's happening. And I appreciate all of you being able to share your thoughts today. And that's why I'm here. I'm excited to hear about your story. And again, thank you so much for sharing, both of you. And I wish we could do more of this and have more people participate.
Hopefully we will. Thank you so much, Marvin. Nerea, go ahead. I think that's how you pronounce your name, in Spanish at least. Miria.
She doesn't have
a mic. Yeah, you can ask the question in the chat for sure. Maybe while you type, we go to Carla. Or yes, go ahead.
I think Alexandra too was. I don't know if this.
Oh, that's true. I think.
Can you
sorry.
hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, go for it, Carla.
Oh, sorry, I'm dying. I just want to make a comment. I don't have a question.
Yes, go for it.
And I might be totally discording you.
I think you're cutting off, at least on my end. Is she cutting off?
Sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We can hear you now.
Yeah.
Have to be careful when I've been misquoting Soledad, but I think Soledad at some point said there are the people that when there's adversity, they keep going.
Yes.
I think
Sorry, I cannot hear your question.
No, Carla, you keep cutting off. So maybe if you type the question on the chat, that'd be great. And And we'll move to Alexandra in the meantime.
Hi.
Hi, Alex.
So first of all, I just wanted to thank both of the speakers. It was really encouraging to hear people that also come from Latin America and that have had great success in sciences. So I have two questions for the panelists. I'm from Bolivia, and I'm also working in the field of neuroscience right now. And so I've always had a background in science. My mom is a professor in Bolivia. She's worked for the university for about 25 years. And for me, when I moved to Canada, to Vancouver specifically, to do my bachelor in science in molecular biology, and then I did my master's in neuroscience, and my dream was to be in academia. I absolutely loved it. I worked with my mom before I moved here. I published and I was ready for that. And it was more of a cultural shock of how academia and research is done in South America and the way that it's done here and be treated, that basically discouraged me from continuing in academia. So I'm now working in industry, but I love research. So I think my question is, how do you deal with the cultural differences, with the culture shock that there is with how research is done in your previous place, especially when you've traveled a lot like Catalina has, or when you study back home and then you move here and the environment is totally different? How do you not get discouraged by the cultural differences? I think that's my first question. And my second one is, how do you deal with the pressure of being the one Latina in the room? Like, I've studied in Vancouver, I've lived here for 11 years, and I have never met anyone, any other Latina that's in my field. Never. So this is very exciting for me to meet someone else in neuroscience. But also it feels like when I go to a company or when I apply, when I meet other people, it feels like there's a bigger weight, because it feels like, oh yeah, like they have a stereotype in mind of what I'm going to be, who I'm going to be, and then how do you deal with the weight of having to prove them wrong, basically?
Yeah, well, I as a neuroscientist, hi.
Hi.
Be another Latina neuroscientist. We are not so many. So yeah, we can, keep in touch, and our, situation may be different, but there are many things that are the same, probably. My advice is forget you're a Latina when you're in a room. I mean, I forget about it. You're capable regardless, or you're unique and valuable always, and. Be sure of that first. And if you think that you're a Latina, think of it as a positive thing. And all the things you bring to the table with the way you're different, because diversity is super and enriches, because, it's value, it's value.
Yeah.
But regarding the different ways you say that academia worked in your home country, I didn't. I mean, for me, it was very similar. It was just that there was so much money, For me, that was a shock. Like, I was so used to count the cents. And here I could, that was the time of microarrays, I could just order the microarrays,
Yeah.
Wow. And it took me a while, but one thing that I would advise anybody who's paralyzed by the difference is start small, do a pilot, start with a little bit, with something you are more familiar with, and build up from that, and be brave, be brave. But I see that you still, even though you didn't follow, academia, which is totally fine, I hope you're happy in the job you have. But because they are also companies that are companies and do research, so maybe you can find a company that has a better fit for what you want to do.
Yeah, I'm actually working at a startup that we're working with neuroscience, and we're working for Huntington diseases therapies. So I do research. I think it was more discouraging that I had this idea, and it was more the relationships that I could see my mom having with her colleagues and with her students. And then when I got here, it was completely different how my professors, my masters, my PI treated me, and then how he treated the other students. versus how he treated me, and then how he got along with his colleagues, and what little cooperation they had between them. Like, I feel like academia in South America, it's very, we try to support each other a bit more because it's so hard to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas here, I feel like we were constantly being like afraid, and we were constantly being sabotaged and things like that. So
yeah, I totally understand. I recently moved to San Justin Hospital. I was in a different place at the same department at the same university, and where I'm now is the floor where we are almost only, all the PIs are almost all are women. And there is so much cooperation, and it's so different. So don't think that it's a Canadian problem. Maybe it's a problem from where you were specifically.
Yeah, I was also the only woman in the whole lab for 3 years, so that was not helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Nerea has put her question on the chat, and she says she's an Argentinian woman, a civil engineer, and got her degree in Argentina, but now she's living in the US and plans to move to Canada in the near future. She's always worked in industry, is what I understand, and she doesn't know if she can change her career into research at 36 years old. Would you recommend that she changes into academia, into research at her age, especially as a Latina woman in Canada? Do you have any advice for her?
Well, I would say, first, changing, I think changing is always interesting and good and positive. There's lots of learning. I just will say, when I moved to Canada, I was already in my 40s, almost. Yeah, close to my 40s, 39, 38, 39, when I moved to Canada. So now academia is a tricky place. And maybe Soledad can talk more about that. But, for me, actually, my path early on, I decided I didn't want to be in academia because I was already, in a way, 33 when I finished my PhD, 32 when I finished my PhD, or so on, in my 30s when I finished my PhD. So it was difficult to already look at a path as a PI, and so competitive with grants and getting your teams and all these. But I said there's many paths in science that are not just the academia and the academic path. I don't think Canada is more difficult than the US in terms of academic careers. There is funding challenges, like there are funding challenges in the US, but all depends sometimes on your field and sometimes on the timing and the area. There might be more or less opportunities. But I don't know. Soledad maybe has some other comments in terms of the academia.
Actually, I can give you an advice. There is this engineering school in Montreal, because here, Quebec is like a different country. But we have, even in the University of Montreal, engineering is more like a technical aspect. It's more considered like technical. Not saying it's not good or something. No, it's just the way, it's classified. And there is this fantastic engineering school where a friend of mine is doing a PhD while she's working in a company as an engineer. So it gives you the flexibility of work and study as an engineer. And because, if you want to go to academia, you have to have a PhD. And maybe at this time of your life, you cannot afford not to work. So that's it will give you some freedom, but also you need to know French. And this school is called, I was Googling, it's called École de Technologie Supérieure, ETS in Spanish, Escuela de Tecnología Superior. you should check it out. More in general, it's difficult to start in academia when you're older, because for a new principal investigator, you have the possibility to apply to new researcher grants, but the time starts to count when you finish your PhD. If you don't have a PhD, actually, maybe that's good, because when you finish your PhD, then the time will count. And in my case, I did my PhD so long ago that I cannot, maybe I should do another PhD if I want to be a PI. But yeah, that's my advice. Look into that school. And I mean, and you are not old. I mean, I'm 52. I'm considering a change of career. So go ahead.
That's awesome. Thank you, Soledad. Thank you, Catalina. It has been great. I'm gonna give the floor, I guess, to Camila. I think she's gonna read a comment that she got on her direct messages, and we'll be closing because it's 7 p.m. here. I don't know what time it is in the East Coast. It's 10 or so.
Yes. Just briefly, because it's an important point from one of our attendees, Carla. She's talking in regards to situations where people have to persevere in the face of adversity. She says that this is an important topic, and it is very important to persevere. Of course, she says it is a requirement, basically. However, given the statistics that have been provided and given the experiences that we've heard about today, we know that most women may not get the job, and most Latin women will have to work twice, thrice as hard as other people. Most women do not have the resources to persevere because they have children, because they have financial difficulties, because they face social discrimination. All of these are systemic barriers that we are all aware of. So there are many women that did not get a job, not because they did not persevere, but because they did not have the privilege or resources to be able to keep persevering. And she mentions that it's important to recognize this, because we don't want people to think that they cannot make it because they give up when they could have kept going, and that many women that persevere will still not get that job until something changes radically in the system and not based on an individual basis. So thank you, Carla, for bringing that up. We really appreciate it.
And, I will totally agree. And thanks, Carla, for that comment. And that's why I think it is important for all of us to be committed also to not just, advancing our own spaces, but commit to us as a community. The work that Squiz does in creating awareness, in educating and changing the world, and really bringing the tools. Actually, Squiz has done training even to organizations where I work with. Now they're collaborating with Genome Canada. They used to work with Genome BC. So that's a super important point, Carla. Yeah, because persevere, yes, but sometimes we cannot. We don't have, and society has to change. We have seen already changes. I think it is good that in these last years we have seen already some evolution, and companies are putting together the equity, diversity, and inclusion roadmaps and strategies and all that. But we have to, and I think one important area to where we can contribute as a community is so politely and I would say diplomatically in a way, but bring those challenges, like what I mentioned, the interview panel. Well, sometimes say, well, if you want to get feedback from my interview, and that's what my friend did, actually. They call the interviewer and they say, can you give us a feedback on the interview? I say, yeah, I can give you a feedback on the interview. I'm just surprised that you're promoting so much diversity, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and you have a zero diverse interview, panel of interviewers. So I think highlighting these and pointing out like sometimes, again, I point out, how come there is no woman in this panel here? How come there's no woman interviewing? How come there is no Latino present in this, when there are people that are qualified and could perfectly do that? So totally, Carla, it's not just about an individual effort and persistence, but it's also about changing the system and really opening doors for people that don't have to work twice and that don't have to persevere and give all their lives to get to a point.
Yeah, thank you so much, Catalina. That's a great way to close. Soledad, if you have anything else to add, yeah, we can have that. And then
I want to thank you again for the opportunity to give my opinion, to be heard, and hopefully it helped people who are listening too. And on a positive note, I think this kind of events that we can do online, I think it's the only good thing of the pandemic, that now we have, so much opportunities to network that we didn't have before. And that's something, men are very good at, to network. I see my partner, he's a scientist. He networks over a beer. I have, other things to do, but to have these opportunities online, and to be together, even we are in different cities, that's fantastic. I think it will help a lot from now on, to diversify, to make us network, to make us powerful together.
Thank you so much, Soledad. Camila, you have the last word.
Thank you. No, just echoing everybody's comments. I'm really grateful with our moderator that did a wonderful job this evening, leading the conversation.
Thank you as well for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we can see that experience in journalism, and our speakers who have shared their stories with us and hopefully inspired all of the attendees tonight to dream big. And to echo Carla's last comment, things are changing. It's a hopeful moment, but there is a lot of work to be done. So the work never ends, and hopefully we can repeat this event and come up with more creative solutions to bring everybody together. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you to all the people that joined. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having this.
Bye.
A pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.